Carol Hamilton sat at her desk in her Midtown Manhattan office, staring at the stack of project proposals piled before her. For 10 years, she had worked as a creative director at Redline Advertising. Her advertising campaigns were consistently innovative and highly regarded within the industry. "Carol, you were absolutely wonderful in today's proposal meeting," her colleague Jennifer said, approaching her desk. "Thank you. But I'm calling it a day now. I need to go see Noah's school play," Carol replied with a smile as she stood up and packed documents into her bag. Her mind was already filled with thoughts of her 13-year-old son Noah, who would be playing the lead role in his school play for the first time tonight. The subway ride from Brooklyn to her suburban home in Queens took about 40 minutes. As Carol watched the scenery pass by outside the window, she reflected on the past 5 years. Her divorce from Greg had not been easy. He had suddenly announced that I needed time to find himself when Noah was just 8 years old. After the divorce was finalized, Greg moved to Chicago. Monthly phone calls and twice-yearly visits, that was the extent of Noah's relationship with his father. Upon arriving at her apartment, Carol was greeted by Mrs. Rodriguez, the babysitter. "How was everything today?" Carol asked as she put down her keys. "Fine, Noah's been reviewing his script all afternoon. He seems a bit nervous," Mrs. Rodriguez replied. Carol thanked Mrs. Rodriguez and headed to her son's room. She knocked on the door and heard a come in from inside. Noah was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the tie of his school uniform. He was already approaching his father's height. He had inherited his black hair and blue eyes from his father, but his expressions and gestures were just like Carol's. "How do I look?" Noah asked with a slightly nervous expression. "Very handsome," Carol said, placing her hand on her son's shoulder. "Today is a special day. I'm so proud of you." Noah's cheeks flushed slightly. Lately, he had become embarrassed by his mother's displays of affection. "Mom, did you hear from Dad today?" The question came abruptly. Carol hesitated momentarily, then shook her head. "No." "Why?" "Nothing," Noah said, looking away from the mirror. "He told me he's back in New York." Carol was unsettled by this news but tried not to show it. She had heard from a mutual friend 2 weeks ago that Greg had returned to New York, but he hadn't contacted her directly. "I see. When did you hear that?" "Last week, when we talked on the phone. Dad said he wants to come see my play too." Carol was at a loss for words. She had mixed feelings about Greg suddenly returning to his son's life. It might be good for Noah. But why was the father who had been distant for years suddenly taking an interest? "It's time, Noah. Let's go," Carol changed the subject. The school auditorium was buzzing with parents. Carol secured seats in the front row and looked through the program. The play was a modern version of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. She heard the doors at the back of the auditorium open. Turning around, Carol saw Greg walking in. He made his way toward the front, navigating through the crowd with some hesitation. "Carol," he smiled awkwardly. "May I sit down?" Carol silently pointed to the seat next to her. Greg, whom she hadn't seen up close for 5 years, appeared to have aged slightly. However, the charm that had attracted Noah to him remained intact. "Sorry for showing up suddenly," Greg said quietly. "But it's been a while since I've seen Noah." "He's looking forward to seeing you," Carol replied stiffly. On the way home that night, Noah was excited about seeing his father after so long. Greg had treated them to dinner after the play and asked Noah about his weekend plans. "Let's meet often from now on." "I've missed you," Greg promised Noah. Back at the apartment, Noah immediately retreated to his room. Carol noticed that he seemed different somehow. While it could be teenage rebellion, she sensed it was something more. That weekend, Greg took Noah to the movies. When Noah returned home, he was oddly quiet and seemed lost in thought. "How was it? Did you have fun?" Carol asked, but Noah gave a vague reply. "Yes, I guess. Dad's changed. But it's nothing." After that, Noah began checking his phone frequently, apparently exchanging messages with someone. Carol was curious but didn't have time to investigate further as a major project deadline was approaching. One evening, while Carol was working late at the office, her colleague Marcus stopped by her desk. "Congratulations, Carol," he said. "For what?" she asked, confused. "I heard Greg's getting remarried." "He seemed happy. I ran into him at a downtown bar last week." Carol was momentarily speechless. Greg was getting remarried? He hadn't mentioned anything. And for the first time, Carol heard the name of Greg's new girlfriend. "It's a woman named Vanessa, right?" Marcus continued. "I think that was her name. He said she's successful in real estate." The pieces of Noah's puzzling recent behavior began falling into place in Carol's mind. She quietly shut down her computer. "I'm going home. I need to see Noah." Carol was cradling a coffee cup in both hands, gazing out the living room window at the fallen leaves dancing in the yard. Noah had already left for school after barely touching his breakfast. She picked up her phone, took a deep breath, and tapped Greg's number. After 3 rings, Greg's voice came through. "Carol? What is it? Is Noah okay?" "Yes, he's fine," Carol replied calmly. "Don't you have something you should be telling me?" Silence fell on the other end of the line. "I heard from Marcus." "Is it true you're getting remarried?" Carol asked directly. Greg let out a small sigh. "Yes, it's true. I was planning to tell you. I was just waiting for the right timing." "Timing?" Carol's voice held a hint of irritation. "Our son apparently already knows. Now I understand why he's been so restless lately." "I'm sorry," Greg apologized. "I was planning to tell Noah gradually. Vanessa and I met a year ago. She's a wonderful woman. A successful real estate agent. And..." Carol prompted. "She wants to meet Noah. I'd like to introduce them formally. How about dinner on Saturday? Could you bring Noah?" Carol gripped the window frame tightly. Having dinner with her ex-husband's new girlfriend seemed like her worst nightmare. But she understood she needed to remain calm for Noah's sake. "All right." For Noah's sake, she answered quietly. Saturday afternoon, Carol and Noah climbed into a taxi. She wore a specially purchased navy blue dress and had her hair nicely styled. Next to her, Noah anxiously stared out the window. "Are you looking forward to it?" Carol asked, trying to ease her son's tension. "Yes, I guess," Noah's voice was small. "Is something worrying you?" Noah glanced at his mother, then quickly looked away. "Dad really seems to like Vanessa." Carol sensed something troubling, but didn't press further. "That's good, isn't it?" When they arrived at the luxury apartment building on the Upper East Side, a doorman greeted them and escorted them to the elevator. Greg's apartment was on the 25th floor. When the door opened, there stood Vanessa with a perfect smile. She was in her early 40s, and her stylish black dress and flawless makeup made her look like a Hollywood actress. "Carol, I'm so pleased to finally meet you," Vanessa extended her hand. Her voice was sweet as honey, but Carol detected a coldness in her eyes. "And this must be Noah. I've heard so much about you." Noah forced a smile and gave a small nod. His expression showed a tension Carol had never seen before. Greg appeared and led them into the living room. The room was adorned with a marble fireplace, enormous glass windows, and luxurious furniture. The windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park's greenery, and Carol estimated the rent for this place was probably more than twice her monthly salary. "Would you like something to drink?" Vanessa asked, playing the perfect hostess. "Wine? Or a cocktail?" "Just water, thank you," Carol replied politely. Dinner progressed with sophisticated cuisine and awkward conversation. Vanessa asked Noah about school and his hobbies, and he gave terse responses. Carol worried that Noah was more withdrawn than usual. "How's the real estate business?" Carol asked Vanessa, making an effort to keep the conversation going. "Wonderful," Vanessa's eyes lit up. "I'm specializing in the luxury market now. Just last month I sold a $50 million property." She then asked about Carol's work. The advertising industry must be demanding. Especially as a single mother. Carol sensed something hidden in those words. Beneath Vanessa's graceful smile seemed to be something calculated. After dinner, when Greg took Noah to another room to show him a new video game, Carol and Vanessa were left alone. "He's a lovely boy," Vanessa said. "He looks just like Greg." "Thank you," Carol replied. "He means everything to me." "Greg will make a wonderful father," Vanessa raised her wine glass. "We're planning to buy a large house. We'll have a room ready for Noah." Carol frowned. "Noah already has a place to stay. With me." "Of course," Vanessa quickly corrected herself. "But a boy needs his father's presence too, don't you think? Especially during adolescence." Over the next few weeks, Greg began spending more time with Noah. He took his son out on weekends, often with Vanessa accompanying them. Carol had mixed feelings but didn't want to restrict Noah's time with his father. One weeknight, Carol was sorting laundry. Checking the pockets of Noah's jeans, she found his cell phone. The screen lit up with a message notification. Normally, she respected her son's privacy, but she had been concerned about his recent behavior. After a moment's hesitation, she looked at the screen. There was a strange message from Vanessa to Noah: "Keep our secret so your mother doesn't interfere with our happiness. For your father's sake." Carol was confused and disturbed. What secret was Noah being burdened with? She wanted to confront him immediately, but doing so might lose her son's trust. She returned the phone to the pocket and decided to monitor the situation. The next day, Carol contacted Sarah, a longtime friend and excellent lawyer. She visited Sarah's office and explained the situation. "Will my ex-husband's remarriage affect custody or visitation rights for Noah?" Carol asked anxiously. Sarah shook her head. "Legally, it's not an issue. The divorce agreement states that Greg has visitation rights twice a month, but no more than that. But," she continued, choosing her words carefully, "if Noah's behavior seems unusual, you should observe him closely. 13 is a difficult age, but there might be something more serious going on." When Carol returned home, she heard shouting from inside her apartment. She quickly unlocked the door and entered. Noah was standing in the living room, clutching his phone, tears in his eyes. "Stop it. I can't tell Mom. It's wrong." When Noah noticed his mother, he hung up and ran out of the room. Carol stood outside Noah's bedroom door and knocked gently. There was no answer. She quietly opened the door and found her son with his face buried in his pillow. "Noah, can we talk?" she asked gently. "What happened?" "Nothing," he answered without looking up. "Who were you talking to on the phone?" Carol sat on the edge of the bed. "Dad." Noah finally raised his face. His eyes were red and swollen. "Mom, please don't ask anything else. I'm fine." Carol took a deep breath. "I saw Vanessa's message," she said honestly. "What secret are you keeping?" Noah looked at his mother with surprise. "You looked at my phone from my pocket?" "I'm sorry. I was doing laundry." Carol started to make excuses, but Noah shook his head. "It's okay," he said wearily. "You'd find out eventually anyway." Carol braced herself for her son's words. "Find out what?" "About Dad and Vanessa." Noah choked on his words. "Dad is..." At that moment, Carol's phone rang. It was the local restaurant, Trattoria Giulia, confirming their special mother-son dinner reservation for that evening. "I understand, thank you," she ended the call. "Noah, we can talk later. Today is the celebration dinner for your end-of-term exams, remember? Get ready." Noah shrugged and said, "I don't care." "No, we're definitely going. This celebration is for you," Carol said gently but firmly. "We have a reservation at the restaurant in 45 minutes. Get changed." Noah seemed reluctant but complied. They left the apartment with heavy hearts. "Mom," Noah said quietly. "I want to tell you something about Dad." "I'm listening," Carol gently squeezed her son's hand. "Well?" Noah seemed to be searching for words, but appeared to be contemplating something. He suddenly looked ahead and stopped in his tracks. His expression changed completely in the twilight. "What's wrong?" Carol asked worriedly. "Mom, we absolutely can't go back." "Not now," Noah said with a serious expression. Fear flickered in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" Carol was confused. "Please, trust me," Noah's voice was desperate. "Let's take a different route." Carol was unsettled by her son's strange behavior but was about to comply with his serious demeanor. However, she soon saw a crowd gathering in the direction of their apartment. Growing anxious, Carol moved forward. Noah resisted, but she headed toward the entrance of their apartment building. There, a black and white police car was parked. Red and blue lights flashed silently, and neighbors had gathered around. A police officer noticed Carol and walked toward her. Noah was gripping his mother's hand tightly. "Are you the owner of this residence?" the officer asked calmly but officially. Carol answered, feeling her throat go dry, "Yes, I am." The officer hesitated momentarily, then slightly lifted his hat. "Actually," he began. "Actually, your apartment has been vandalized by someone," the officer explained quietly. "From the security camera footage, it appears a woman broke in a fit of rage." Carol asked Noah with a trembling hand on his shoulder, "Did you know?" Noah nodded, tears spilling from his eyes. "Vanessa checked Dad's phone and found messages between you two." She was really angry. "Messages between me and Greg?" Carol was confused. "I've barely been in touch with him lately. Just confirming reservations." "Would you like to come in and check?" The officer escorted them to the apartment. Opening the front door, Carol gasped. The living room had literally become a battlefield. Furniture was overturned, photo frames smashed, and her precious books had pages torn out. Most shocking was the large red spray-painted message on the wall, "Don't protect a cheater." "What?" Carol was at a loss for words. Another officer approached, taking notes. "The suspect is a woman named Vanessa Clark, who has already been detained. She claims to be engaged to your ex-husband. But she's supposed to be someone he met recently, not his fiancée," Carol replied in confusion. "We divorced 5 years ago." The officers exchanged glances. "Ma'am, could you come to the police station to discuss this in more detail? The situation seems complicated." Carol looked at Noah, who was staring at his mother with a frightened expression. "Can he stay with a friend?" she asked the officer. "Of course. We'll send him in a patrol car." Carol called Sarah and briefly explained the situation. Sarah immediately offered to take Noah in. The officer arranged to take Noah to Sarah's home. Before parting, Noah clung to his mother. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have told you," he said through tears. "It's okay, it's not your fault," Carol gently stroked her son's head. "Stay with Sarah. I'll come get you soon." At the police station, Carol finally learned the truth. As she waited in a separate room, a detective entered. "Ms. Hamilton, let me explain the situation," he said, sitting down. "Your ex-husband, Greg Hamilton, has actually been in a relationship with Vanessa Clark for 2 years. 2 years? Carol was surprised. He was supposed to be in Chicago. It seems he was traveling between Chicago and New York, the detective continued. And the problem is that he lied to Ms. Clark, telling her that he was not yet divorced from you. Carol was speechless. "But we divorced 5 years ago." "That's correct. However, he kept telling Ms. Clark that the paperwork wasn't quite finalized yet. In effect, he was leading a double life." Carol held her head in her hands. "Did Noah know?" "Your son apparently discovered evidence last month that Greg Hamilton was also involved with other women. Photos and messages on his father's laptop." "Other women?" Carol asked in disbelief. "It seems he was involved with multiple women. Your son knew the full extent of his father's lies. But he was probably sworn to secrecy." The detective gave her a sympathetic look. "Today, Clark checked Hamilton's smartphone and discovered he was also in contact with you. She misinterpreted this as cheating and became enraged, heading to your apartment. But that was just confirming a reservation. I only thought of him as my ex-husband, Carol said in a daze. Ms. Clark is currently being held on charges of property damage. Do you intend to press charges against her? Carol heaved a deep sigh. I can't think about that right now. I want to go to my son. Before leaving the police station, Carol had an opportunity to meet Vanessa, who was in custody. Her makeup was smeared, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. The two women exchanged a brief conversation in the presence of an officer. I thought you were the other woman, Vanessa said with a trembling voice. Greg told me that your divorce was almost finalized. For 2 years. Carol replied quietly, we divorced 5 years ago. It seems he was deceiving both of us, and other women too. Carol and Noah left Sarah's apartment and walked through the quiet evening streets. They planned to take a taxi to their hotel, but both wanted to walk for a while first, to clear their heads. Noah, I'm sorry, Carol said quietly. I should have noticed something was wrong sooner. It's not your fault, Mom, Noah answered tearfully. Dad told me to keep it secret. He was lying to Vanessa and other women too, and I didn't know what to do. Carol stopped and hugged her son tightly. The cold night wind blew around them. It's not your fault. This is an adult problem, she comforted him. I'm truly sorry you had to carry such a burden. I found it on Dad's laptop, Noah continued in a small voice. Photos, messages. Dad was seeing at least 3 other women. He seemed to be telling all of them he was in the process of separating from his wife. Carol sighed. I never knew Greg was that kind of person. I threatened to tell you, Mom. But Dad said it wouldn't do you any good either, Noah's voice trembled. Vanessa only found out today. She looked at Dad's phone. They arrived at the hotel and settled into a simple but clean room. Noah immediately took a shower and collapsed into bed, exhausted. Carol watched him fall asleep before quietly weeping in the bathroom. The next morning, Carol's phone rang. It was Greg. She hesitated but decided to answer. Carol, listen, Greg's voice was tense. Vanessa stabbed me. I'm in the hospital. Carol caught her breath. What? She was waiting for me when I got home, with a kitchen knife, Greg said. It's just a minor injury, so I'm okay, but the police are here. I want to talk to Noah. Carol tried to maintain her composure. Noah is resting now. He's traumatized by last night's events. I'll come to the hospital. She called Sarah and asked if she could continue looking after Noah. Sarah readily agreed and soon came to pick him up at the hotel. Please keep Noah calm until I return, Carol asked Sarah. He's been hurt enough. When she arrived at the city hospital, police officers were walking up and down the hallway. When Carol gave her name at the reception, a detective approached her. Ms. Hamilton, I need to speak with you, he led her aside. Your ex-husband's injuries were minor, but he's currently under police supervision. Has he been arrested? Carol asked in surprise. Yes, the detective replied with a stern expression. Your ex-husband was involved with multiple women, promising marriage to all of them. More seriously, he's suspected of defrauding them of their assets. Carol was speechless. From Ms. Clark's statement last night and phone records, we've contacted Hamilton's other women, the detective continued. For the past 5 years, he's been swindling money from at least 3 women under the pretext of for our future family. I can't believe it. Carol couldn't hide her shock. Furthermore, he has a gambling addiction and considerable debt. Most of the money he obtained from these women disappeared into that. Carol requested to be taken to Greg's hospital room. He was lying in bed with a bandage on his arm. A police officer stood in the room. Carol, Greg said in a tired voice. Thanks for coming. Where's Noah? I don't intend to let him see you, Carol replied calmly. He's confused enough. Listen, I can explain everything, Greg tried to start making excuses. No explanation is necessary, Carol cut him off. You used our son and deceived many women, including us. For your addiction. Greg turned his face away. I'm sick. I have a gambling addiction. I need help. That doesn't justify your excuses, Carol said quietly but firmly. Noah doesn't want to see you anymore. I respect that. A few days later, Carol began investigating Greg's fraudulent activities with her lawyer. His phone and bank records revealed how methodically he had deceived women and extracted money from them. Carol agonized over how to explain her father's criminal behavior to Noah. She sought advice from a psychological counselor and finally decided to speak honestly to him in age-appropriate terms. Dad is sick, Carol gently explained to Noah. He has an illness called gambling addiction. He needed money and began deceiving people. That's never right, and I can't forgive him for involving you, but he's facing the consequences of his actions now. Noah listened silently. What will happen to us? He finally asked. We'll get through this together, Carol promised. No matter what happens, I'm on your side. A month later, the trial began. Greg was charged with fraud, and multiple women, including Carol and Vanessa, took the stand. Carol was determined to tell the truth for Noah's sake as well. The defendant not only betrayed my trust but also psychologically harmed my 13-year-old son, she testified in court. He forced my son to keep secrets, causing him to suffer being torn between loyalty to his father and the truth. In the courthouse hallway, Vanessa approached Carol. Her eyes were tired, but showed more resignation than anger. I want to apologize for what happened to your apartment, Vanessa said quietly. I was so confused at the time. You're a victim too, Carol looked at her with sympathy. We were both deceived by the same man. We're both victims, Vanessa smiled weakly. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and Greg was ultimately found guilty of fraud and financial exploitation. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison and ordered restitution to the victims. Noah, Carol placed her hand on her son's shoulder as they left the courthouse. It's over now. Time for a new beginning. Noah nodded and took his mother's hand. 6 months later, Carol was drinking coffee in the kitchen of her new apartment, admiring the park view through the window. She could see children running among the lush trees. She took a deep breath, savoring this peaceful moment. After Greg's trial, she had been promoted to head of the creative department. The increased income allowed them to move to a better apartment. Noah was gradually recovering too. Weekly psychological counseling was helping his healing process, and at his new school, he had joined the drama club and made friends. Mom, can I go to the movies with my friends today? Noah poked his head out from the living room. His expression was brighter than before, and strength had returned to his eyes. Of course, Carol answered with a smile. After Noah left, Carol's phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello? Carol? It's Vanessa. Carol was surprised. She hadn't been in contact with Vanessa since Greg's trial. I'd like to talk to you, Vanessa's voice was calmer than before. Do you have time? They met at a nearby cafe. Vanessa had cut her hair short and adopted a simpler style. Her eyes held a new determination. I've started a support group for fraud victims, Vanessa explained over coffee. There are many women who've had similar experiences. Not just victims of Greg, but of other con artists too. I want to help women like us. Would you consider joining? Carol hesitated. She was reluctant to dig up painful memories. But at the same time, she thought her experience might help other women. Let me think about it, she answered honestly. The following week, a letter arrived from Greg. He wrote that he had begun participating in a prison rehabilitation program. He had written a letter to Noah. Carol read it and was surprised. It contained words of genuine remorse. Noah, Carol said quietly at dinner, there's a letter from Dad. Would you like to read it? Noah put down his chopsticks and thought for a moment. I don't want to see him yet, but I'd like to read the letter, he decided. Carol respected her son's decision. She too was beginning to face the past in her own way. A year later, Carol and Vanessa officially launched Trust Again, a support organization for fraud victims. Carol's advertising experience helped raise awareness for the organization. Many women came to them, finding paths to healing and new beginnings. Greg continued to reflect on his actions while serving his sentence. He received addiction counseling and promised to work on making restitution to his victims and rehabilitation after his release. Carol and Noah couldn't forgive him immediately, but they believed that time would heal some wounds. On a peaceful spring evening, Carol and Noah were watching the sunset from the balcony of their new home. The city's silhouette stood out against the crimson-stained sky. "Mom, we're going to be okay, right?" Noah suddenly asked. There was still a trace of anxiety in his voice. "Yes, we've become stronger," Carol answered gently. "We're in this together, no matter what. Real family isn't about blood ties, but about protecting each other and valuing the truth," Noah said quietly. Carol smiled and gently stroked her son's head. Healing wounded hearts would take a long time. But a new life full of hope stretched out before them.